Hi, I'm James, and you can join me today. I'm painting up a figure, Adrian Carter de Wiart, who is part of the Giants in Miniature series. Now, he's a fascinating person. He was known as the unkillable soldier, and the reason for that will become apparent as we go through this. So, I've started off by just putting a bit of Guilliman flesh on. I find that gives a really nice effect. Now, Adrian Carton de Wiart was born in 1880. It's believed at the time he was the illegitimate son of the Belgian King Leopold II. There's no evidence either way on that one. And in 1899 he decided he wanted to be a soldier. He didn't want to follow his father, so he decided he was going to enlist in the British Army for the Second World War, and he enlisted underage as Trooper Carton. Now, there is an interesting note that he says that if he hadn't actually got into the British Army, he was actually volunteered for the Boers, and he did consider the Foreign Legion as well in France. So he ends up, oops, that was clever, good job, that's a bottle dripper top. So he does end up out in Africa, and he's shot twice. No, just shot once, sorry there. You lose track with him, you'll see why as we go. He was shot in the stomach. He returned home, went back to Oxford, where he was a bit of a celebrity among his peers, although he didn't actually feel that he was. So, just search him there. I'm using the sand golem. What I'm going for with this is I'm going for more, that's what I want, civilian coat rather than a military coat, although it will pass well enough for that. Because a lot of officers did purchase their own sort of coats, things like that. That was the great coats. That was fairly typical. So he's been shot and is invalided home. Finishes his career at Oxford, where he feels he's not really done much. He hasn't really got any of the glory, but his compatriots think he's a bit of a celebrity. So he's then commissioned in 1901 into the 2nd Imperial Light Horse, which is a yeomanry type unit, and he goes back to South Africa for still fighting the Second World War. He's now into the guerrilla fighting stage, and while he's there, he's given a regular commission into the 4th Dragoons, and he actually finishes the war without being shot again, which is quite unusual for him. He then serves in India. He quite likes India, finds the sporting, the hunting and all of that very much to his taste, so he quite enjoys himself there. Has quite a successful time out there, and in 1914, on the eve of the First World War, he's actually really happy because he's just been given an assignment to go and fight. He's sent out to British Somaliland, and while he's on the way, Britain declares war. He is most upset about this because he feels he's going to miss the war in a real little sideshow. So he's there fighting the sort of the local rebels, the Mad Mullah, as he's called by the British, Mohammed bin Abdullah. He's attached to the Somaliland Camel Corps, and back to form, he is shot twice, and that is in the face. He actually loses his left eye and part of his left ear. And the figure is wearing an eye patch. He was notorious for wearing an eye patch. I'm just going to give that a second to dry while I talk. And he's invalided home. So in 1915, he then gets sent to France. He has a bit of a problem. He's told that He can't wear an eye patch. They don't want the Germans thinking that they're reduced to sending people with that sort of injury. He agrees and is given a glass eye. As soon as he's agreed and they're happy with him going out, he then takes off the glass eye, throws it out of his taxi window, which is very typical, I get the feeling, for this guy. So he's back into France. Now he gets 7 wounds while he's in France. Yeah, he's not the luckiest of guys in some ways. He's lucky, I suppose, to keep surviving. So I'm just switching now to dark wood because I want to give him some darker trousers. Now he actually loses his left hand and part of his arm, and he actually ends up with that pulling off the fingers himself. After the doctor refuses to amputate. Yeah, quite an interesting character, as I say. He also has injuries to the skull and ankle, which he gets on the Somme. He carries on. He goes to Passchendaele, where he's shot in the hip, Cambrai, where he's shot in the leg, and he's shot in the ear at Arras. Yeah, he's getting shot to pieces in installments is how it feels to me. So from there, in 1916, he's given command of the 8th Gloucesters, where he actually wins the Victoria Cross. Now the Victoria Cross, he always feels, could have been awarded to anybody in that battalion. He's very adamant about that, and in fact he barely mentions it in his autobiography. So he survives the war, even having lost part of the back of his skull, and he then is sent to Poland as part of the British military mission there. Now, as part of that, he ends up doing more than actually observing. He ends up sort of involved in the fighting. Now, there's a very interesting little inconsistency in his memoirs. In his memoirs, he talks about not carrying a pistol in the trenches because he feels that he would probably have shot his own troops. Yeah, he doesn't cope with cowardice very well. Now, while he says that, he does then, while he's in Poland, he does end up quite regularly, I get the feeling, using his pistol. He definitely uses it on one occasion where his train is ambushed by Cossacks, and it's almost, if you've seen the film Young Winston, there are remarkable echoes to it. It's not going to give enough of a differentiation, that one, I don't think, so I'm going to change colour. He actually, at one point, he's firing his revolver from the footplate. He actually falls off the train and has to run to catch up with it. Yeah, it's a game in there on itself. So he carries on there. When the mission is wound down, he retires from the army. Quite happily then goes to live in Poland. Loves being in Poland. He loves the hunting and the fishing, and he's having a great time. So now he's done that, time flies, and 15 years pass without him actually getting injured, which is probably a unique part of his life. I need a little bit more water on that. So what now happens? It's 1939. I think we can guess what's going to happen. In June, just before war breaks out, in September, he is recalled to the colours, and what he does is he's reappointed to his old job. So he is now running the military mission in Poland again. So he's now running that. and then the Germans, followed by the Russians, invade, and there is a move to get out of there. He is getting out in quite a hurry, as you can imagine, with the mission, and as they are trying to get out, they're actually strafed by the Luftwaffe. They're being chased by not just the Germans, but the Russians as well. And he eventually gets over the border using a false passport. So he gets back to the UK. Once he gets back to the UK, he ends up being given command of a mission to Norway. So while he's on the mission to Norway, the plan is for him to land a task force at Namsos and then take Trondheim. Now it doesn't go particularly well. The French troops turn up without skis, without any of the equipment that they need. But even so, they manage to push south and take Trondheim. Unfortunately, as they're moving into Trondheim, the Germans are there, and the German ships in particular, they have no answer to. They can't really fight them. So they have a problem. He recommends evacuation. It's eventually agreed that he can evacuate, and he ends up back in the UK. Now, he's now back in the UK, and is sent to Northern Ireland to command the 61st Division. Now the 61st Division is there in case of a German invasion of Northern Ireland, which Student did actually plan diversionary operations to do that. So he's now all set to do that, and then he's told he's too old. Unfortunately, they don't feel that somebody of his age should be commanding an active brigade, so active division. So he's not very happy about this, as you can imagine, but orders are orders. So what does he now do? Well, he gets appointed, quite interestingly, having had a division taken off him. He's now given command of the British Yugoslav military mission. Now the idea with this is he's going to go and liaise with the Yugoslavs. Unfortunately, his Wellington, as he's heading out there, encounters a bit of bad luck. It actually has both of its engines fail on it. Use the same brown for the butt of the Webley. So what he does, he crash lands in the sea, unfortunately off Italian Libya, which means that he ends up in Italian captivity. Now he goes into Italian captivity. He's held in a POW camp, and Italians are quite keen to keep him, as you can imagine. He's quite keen not to be kept. So what does he do? Well, he spends 7 months digging a tunnel to get out. He escapes 5 times, including, and I always love this one, he spends 8 days on the run as dressed and pretending to be an Italian peasant. Now let's bear in mind he's at this point 62. He's wearing an eye patch, he's got an empty sleeve, multiple scars, bits of his ear missing, doesn't speak Italian, and he still escapes for 8 days. Yeah, it gets even more bizarre after this, because what then happens is he's actually called by the Italian government, and they say, we want you, it's not going to be a very good paint for that one, I don't think, that's not for a different one. Usually a bad and black. We want you to go to the British government and explain that Italy wants to surrender. So what does he do? He agrees. He does put a condition on it. He will only go if he isn't made to look like a gigolo. I always love that, and he does give them their due, that the clothing they sought out for him, he describes it as worthy of Savile Row. So off he goes to Lisbon. Once he gets to Lisbon, I've just realised I didn't paint his moustache. Once he gets to Lisbon, what he does is passes on the message, and he is then sent back to Britain. Yes, we still haven't finished his war yet. We're only up to 1943. So he's then sent, of all places, to China as Winston Churchill's personal representative to Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Chinese nationalists. He does a very good job there. He really learns to like the Chinese people. Gets on really well with them. Even sort of the peasantry, he gets on with them. And he then, having made it through that part of the war without any more injuries, goes to the surrender in the Far East. And on his way home in 1947, he comes via French Indochina, goes to Rangoon, and proceeds to fall down some stairs when some coconut matting shifts. Great. And he actually breaks several vertebrae. That really is the last injury of his career. He then has made it through the war, or wars, and he returns home, settles down in Ireland, and lives a peaceful last few years of his life before dying in 1963, age 83. So he does quite a good innings there, you have to admit. Now he writes an autobiography called Happy Odyssey, which is a fascinating read. It's a typical understated sort of account. It's exactly what you'd expect from someone of that era. And he was immortalised by the Sabaton song, for those who like Sabaton, called The Unkillable Soldier. He also features in, it's believed it's him, he features in Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honour trilogy as Brigadier Richie Hook. So, as a figure, you can probably get a lot of uses out of this. The fact he's missing the arm probably eliminates it from his early career. We're looking at this more at his later career. So how could we use this figure? Let's think of how many different uses we can come out with for it. Well, fairly obviously, you could use him in the First World War. I think he would work nicely with that. You could make that a bit more uniform. You could paint the epaulets or rank insignia on and so on. So you could use him for that. You could use him for the Second World War. I think, obviously you've got just post First World War. You've got him in Poland. You could then use him in the Second World War. I mean, he would fit in nicely in Norway there. He'd also be usable just as fine in Northern Ireland. The pistol limits him as a prisoner of war in Italy, I accept, but you could use him in China as well. Or in an alternative where he actually does make it to Yugoslavia, we have a really useful little commander figure there. I probably am not going to use him too much for the First World War, simply because he's got the pistol, which he didn't carry in the First World War, but after that it's definitely usable. And that was a really quick, simple paint. It's not a fantastic one, but that, once I've based it, is tabletop standard, to me.